First of all, my thanks to everyone I've been working with at SALT, Costa, and Sona, who's this guy here yesterday, Mustafa, who's helping record Sona yesterday, and Yosis, who's going to accompany me tonight in a quick reading. So, there's two pieces of work that I'm making. This is the first one. Sona was stood here, with the microphone here. I had my computer here, Mustafa had another computer, and I was playing him sounds of percussion that's recorded electronically, digitally, and cut up into very small sound pieces, very like segments of 1 or 2 seconds. Mustafa was imitating these sounds. Sorry, Mustafa? Not Mustafa. Sona. And why invite a farmer? Why invite an animal farmer? Well, it's the idea is that each of us carry a soundtrack in our lives, the soundtrack of the job, that is the background of our lives, the soundtrack of what we do. And this is more pronounced depending on what vocation we have, what job we have. And so I chose two. I chose the job of an animal farmer or an accountant. And whether I use the animal farmer or the accountant depends on the financial stability of the institution that I'm working with. So when I was working with the Kunsthal Oslo in November, the books are not looking so good, so they wanted me to work with an accountant. So when I'm recording Sona, I guess without even thinking about it, I'm listening to the sounds that he might, that I associate with his life, and occasionally you just detect this coming out. I did it once before in Evora, Portugal, and the farmer heard himself sounding a little bit like a sheep, stopped himself and laughed, and then we started to go on. Okay, so that's one element. And the pieces that we record get put together into 2 or 3 seconds. The other part of it is a very short bass line, and the bass line is somehow reminiscent to a bass line that you would have as an interlude in an American sitcom. Something that takes you one sequence to another. Something like Seinfeld or Friends, they use it. So we put this with Sona, the sound of him imitating generic sounds, but with a particular voice that comes from this vocation behind him. And then this gets played when people enter or leave the exhibition. It acts as an audio ID for the show, and it proclaims and broadcasts the arrival of a visitor. So they actually become the focus of attention rather than the work that's on show. It's the person coming in who gets the attention. So thinking about that visitor led me to think about this piece of work. This is it's just taken on my phone today. This is the second piece of work. I'm making a series of hot paintings made with spices, herbs, detergents, whatever is lying around in the person's kitchen, plus a bit more. And the hot paintings are done in the homes of visitors to SALT. So I'm going away from the institution with the visitor to their home and making these paintings on the hobs. We could talk about this a bit further. Why spices? Why these products? How does this fit in with paint? What is the relationship between that and expressionism in painting? What is the relationship between the uses of spice and Istanbul's place historically with regards to the trade of spices and so forth? So these things are in the background and don't get dealt with, don't get touched. They just sit there. So I will be. So we were photographing these, and so I will be cropping these and making photographs out of them for the exhibition. So now I go back quite a long time. I thought to introduce 2 books that I've worked on. I'll give you a little preamble of some pieces of work that I make that I associate with these books. They either lead up to the books or they are quite connected to the books. So the first one is a sculpture park that I've been that I've been working on in a small town called Järvenpää in the middle of Estonia. I bought a piece of land there. Well, it took a few years to go through, around 2005, 2006, but I started working on the project in 2002. I bought a particular piece of land. This is the land here that had been owned by a very successful cooperative, an Estonian cooperative, in this town of Järvenpää, right in the center of the town. When the Russians arrived, some of them fled. Two were deported to Siberia, one to Scandinavia. He then returned and has these kind of pockets of land that obviously have kind of gone to ruin, maintained a little bit. So I bought this piece of land from him. Then he disappeared. Then I had to hire a private detective to find him. Things got a little bit complicated. I think it actually took me longer. I think it took me 8 years for this to go through. So all the while, I was busy working. This is the signage for the sculpture park. It says radical loyalty. And radical loyalty is a term, it's not just the name of the park, it's the question that I went to the people who I asked to be involved in the project to come up with the ideas for what the sculptures would be for the park. So I went to have conversations with directors of global corporations in Europe, and the conversations were focused on loyalty and how that might be expressed in a radical way. So there were 5 sectors involved. This was from the director was called Kari Vaja from the company Sonera Telia, the biggest telecom in Scandinavia, and for his sculpture, he felt loyalty towards thoughts on social sustainability. He'd read that a cockroach would survive a nuclear holocaust, so he wanted a sculpture of a cockroach and a rat. A rat also would survive a nuclear holocaust. This was with Will Davey, who's the Director of Knowledge, such a curious title, Director of Knowledge at Schlumberger Sema, a huge business that you've probably not heard of. Also advisor to Chirac and Tony Blair in the 90s. And he wanted his sculpture to be a score. And he wanted the verses to be transparent. He talked about Enron and how this was the downfall of modern corporate companies, organizations, was that when we lose this transparency, that is when the problems happen. So I asked him, what score do you want? He said, I want 9-0. I said, well, why 9-0? He said, anything larger would seem, a little bit ridiculous. These etchings, the drawings, then get made into maquettes like so. He wanted the 0 to be in rock, to be intransigent, the 9 to be warm. And then I made an artist's impression of what the sculpture park will look like. So this is oil on canvas. And I could do the sculptures and I could do the grass and the buildings, but when it came to the trees, I couldn't do them. You need some kind of, I guess, a style or a manner. So I rolled the canvas up and sent it to the artist Padraig Timoney to finish the painting. This is it displayed in Studio Voltaire in London. So every time I got to exhibit it, I would make another maquette. And this is in Kunstverein Munich a couple of years ago. And the idea is, though it's getting a little bit difficult now, is to re-employ all the sculptors who were working for the Soviet Union during their period of occupation, to bring them out of unemployment. And yet to make these sculptures for the directors, with the directors' ideas of Starbucks and Sonera Telia and Schlumberger, etc. I had it in my mind that if Adam Smith's harmony of interest could occur, then perhaps it could occur in the form of this sculpture park. And this was at a very particular moment when Estonia was about to join the EU. So all these companies were eager to arrive in Estonia and to have access to the Estonian market. At the same time, the Estonians were also curious about what would happen in the situation and were therefore interested as well. So there was a lot of backstory to this with the people involved, with the guy that I was buying the land from that disappeared, his history, a history of Estonians burying their sculptures so that they wouldn't be removed by the Russians when they arrived. This rapid kind of burying and hiding of things. And so I thought, how do I bring this content in? The idea with my work usually is that these conversations and these connections with people, usually people whose roles are symbolic in some way or other, get encapsulated in an object. It gets crystallized in an object. But there is always this surplus stuff around that I'm interested in and I don't really know what to do with. So I started writing these narratives involving these characters, these people, not characters, I made them into characters, these people. And that kind of, it just felt like overdoing it for this project. So I thought, well, there is something interesting there in the subject of sculpture parks and how that might be a premise for narratives. And I was thinking of Raymond Roussel's Locus Solus, that we think of in terms of its structure and not so much in terms of what it was describing. Because if we think about what it was describing, we think of perhaps what could have been the first sculpture park, albeit fictional. Basically, he's talking about Cantarell, the scientist in Paris, who's gathering these objects and creating this park in his garden. But what Raymond Roussel, of course, is known for is the use of his language, whereby he had these systems in order to take the phonetics of a word and to remove that from its meaning and to find parallel words that could make a new logic, could make a new sense. People could explain that way better than I can. So this is the book. It says Magnetic Promenade. It's a book of fictional sculpture parks. I don't have any left. It starts with a chapter from Raymond Roussel's Locus Solus. And I made these airbrush illustrations inside the book. So there's various pieces of writing in the book from invited writers, and then with it starting with Raymond Roussel's Locus Solus, I asked a poet called Matthew Welton to finish the book with a poem that would use the structure of Locus Solus. He's an amazing writer, an amazing poet. I thought if I can ask this of anybody, then it would be Matthew Welton. And it's written in such a way that it can be just, each line can be taken in random. And myself and Yelitz, we're going to do that now. My mistaken immersion in visceral nervousness.
I'm afraid I have a taste for nutritional worms.
The marimba player fluffs in the diatonic verse.
It's a shame he's unnerved by the mythical curse.
The delay in alerting the vicar can't hurt.
When she's praying, her words become dissonant and slurred.
Marinating the turkey in bitterish herbs.
You may say nothing further on kissing that girl.
A delay, a diversion, a detour, a search.
Was it Scooter and Fozzie, or Piggy and Kermit?
A dictator who earns what his citizens earn.
Unrelated and turgid, and wicked and terse.
A masala whose effects include delirium of the nerves.
Undismayed, undeserving, and deserving in bursts.
Amadeus, 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 Wolfgang.
Unassertive but earnest, febrile but assured.
He's a sailor who served with the Maui Reserve.
It's a nurse, but it's not this particular nurse.
Lemonade with a fizz that's decidedly weak.
The sensation was worsened and indefinitely warped.
From my spaceship, the Earth appears distant and blurred.
Potato or turnip? Jicama or burdock?
It's my failure to further this ridiculous research.
There's no reason on earth to desist from the stir-fry.
A Jamaican, a German, a Chilean, a Turk.
There's a state on the coast, the militia usurped.
I'm arranging your words into syllabic bursts.
The Mosaic laws favour a disciplined world.
Himalayas unfeasible, unwise.
The mistaken impression that love's undeserved.
Gaining weight after 30 becomes tricky, I've heard.
There's a hoard of some worth in our fiscal reserves.
If today was a Thursday, I'd be thinking the worst.
She's persuaded her friends I'm a miserable jerk.
If the stadium's cursed, then the kickers are cursed. In a place where the surfers are quick to disperse, I must say that at first it was difficult to work, which is the title of the piece. Thank you. So I'll use another piece of work to take us into the latest book. He's a security guard at Boodle's on Bond Street. Boodle's make jewellery for the royal family. They make jewellery for A-listers. The jewellery is designed so it can be photographed from like 50 meters away, and it's shining. This is like, these things are loaded with jewels. They're also the sponsors of the Liverpool Biennial. And I approached Boodle's, not easily. Basically, I was standing outside. Not this one, but one in Liverpool. Let's see, maybe I have a picture of it. I was standing outside, looking at the jewellery, and the security guard would just be like stood the other side. I mean, I was dressed pretty smartly. And then I'd like look at another piece, and then the security guard would move. And then eventually I just walked in and I said, "Can I have a brochure, please?" Then they gave me a brochure, and then the Biennial fixed up a meeting so I could talk to them and propose an idea that they take the money that they were giving to the Biennial, take it back, and use it to make a piece of jewellery for the Biennial as a piece of work that would respond to the press release and the premise of the Biennial. This wasn't an easy conversation. I had Nicholas Wainwright, the director, the owner of Boodle's, on the phone on his yacht, probably doing the school run. And I told him my idea, and he said, "Well, what's in it for me?" And I said, "A chance to do something that you wouldn't normally do." And he said, "Why would I want to do that?" He says, "If you have clothes made by McQueen, it looks like clothes made by McQueen. Why would I want to do something that doesn't look like what I do?" I said, "Well, you can do that. It's just the brief and the reason for doing it changes, and you're invited to react to that." So he said no. And so I got in touch with the marketing person at Liverpool Biennial, who's amazing. She got on the phone and she just told him off. She just told him off for saying no, told him off for being rude and abrupt, because I'd repeated what he'd said. Told him off so much that he agreed. So this is the press release. So it's quite a difficult conversation to have about this press release. I went in for a meeting with the designers at Boodle's, and I guess I just sort of tried to talk about the language that they use to, promote their jewellery, and how that has its own idiosyncrasies, and how the language that we use to talk about art equally does. And they picked up on a 2 or 3 things. Perhaps this idea of domesticity somewhere appears. Domesticity becomes a place of pathology. Tried to push that one. So this is the ring being made. This is like a mock version, I guess you could say, of the form, made in a very cheap silver. And I was so excited about this that I asked to borrow it, and I disappeared. I just kept it in my pocket and went down to London with it, which they completely freaked out about. Because I know the actual ring that they made was worth an absolute fortune, probably like half the biennial. But this also turned out was quite valuable, and had this I can't remember what the name is, Herculite jewel in it. Anyway, I swiftly brought it back. This is the finished piece with Heliodor, sapphire, yellow sapphires. When they were actually doing it, when the next stage of this, this was just covered in dots made with a Sharpie pen. And I said, well, what are those? And you could just go like that with it. And she said, these are where the diamonds go. I said, what, just like everywhere? She's like, yeah, everywhere. So this is the ring. This is later displayed in Praxis. I don't know if I have any shots from the biennial itself. I don't know if you can make out, but I made this very thin, shallow relief sculpture for it to sit on, which have these pressings from tissue boxes, just like softly into the top. These cheap Boots tissue boxes. But I thought there was like something there with the hands circled from the ring, and there was, a sensibility about it. How are we doing for time? Yeah. So I'll talk about one more project, and I probably won't talk about it in enough detail, because then I'll go on to the book. But this is the college I went to, the Polytechnic. This is the picture that they used on the prospectus to invite me to this college. I saw that picture, I thought, I want to go there. This is where I want to study, in this small industrial town in the Midlands of England. Why? So I went there, and there were people often stood outside over this bank, down this bank here is the entrance area here, and there were always students trying to sell me this newspaper, Morning Star. So Morning Star is the oldest left-wing newspaper that was called the Daily Worker originally. I think it's like the oldest communist newspaper, you could say. It's been going, in Europe. And so they were trying to sell me this newspaper. I looked at this newspaper. I thought the way it appeared had nothing in connection or relationship to what it was trying to say. It was borrowing the format of a tabloid, of the Mirror, of the Sun, and so forth. So I wrote to them, and this is like 1987? Jeez. I wrote to them, and I said, the design of your newspaper is terrible. You need me to redo it. I want to rebrand you, so that you can situate the way that you look with your politics, and you could attract an audience that deserves and wants to read that. And they didn't write back, obviously. And so I've been doing that for the last over 25 years. I still write to them. And at one point they said, okay, we're interested. I think it was like 5 years ago, 2013, I got to go to the offices, I had the conversation. This sounds a little bit different because I had a route through the TUC, the Trade Union Congress, with a friend of a friend, Megan Dobney, who was a regional secretary. She was amazing, and she could put pressure on them because they sell a lot of their newspapers through the trade unions. So she was saying to them, if you don't listen to him and work with him, then the trade unions are not going to be so happy to sell your newspapers. There's quite a lot of pressure she was putting on them. They do still sell more than Freeze, I've got to say. But they do sell 16 they do have 16,000 in circulation each week. It's not, you know, it's not some unknown paper. Curiously enough, the time that I was within 1 year, 2 years of me writing to the newspaper, Paul Rand took on the design of Morningstar Financial Data in the States, one of the biggest financial data analysis consultants in the world. And this is the logo that he came up with, taking the idea of the O from from Thoreau Walden's Pond, the rising sun. Okay, I am going to skip a little bit out here because over these 25 years I've been in touch with them. I put together a working group of people to try and produce a new design from them, which included Marina Vishmit, a brilliant writer and thinker with regards to art and the economy, the designers Dexter Sinister, a visual anthropologist Massimiliano Malona, who was working with the Athens Biennial last time, and great group of people together. What happened was I had the showroom, the Chisholm Hill Gallery, and Studio Voltaire involved in this how to work together scheme. It was all set to go on. We had the workshop for a week, and then Morningstar pulled out. They looked on the website, and they scrolled down the showroom's website, and they saw that it was sponsored by Bloomberg. So they were on the phone, they pulled out, and since then I've been back and forth, still in conversation with them, and I wrote them an open letter, and the open letter included this painting of these two worms coming out of the ground, saying, "Is that the sun or the morning star?" And so then I made a series of these, and each time they're kind of held in place by a big burnt log for no good reason, except for pure expression of, frustration, I guess you could say. Printed on, I paint the colour first with the colour of the Financial Times, and then I paint these worms on top. And the poles are always to the width of the gallery, and then they go on an angle because they're wedged in. Here's one in Crack in Alsace, Altkirch. And there you see it again in the corridor. So we have the security guard from Boodles, but we also have a lot of personnel, staff working at Morningstar that I've been wondering, how to deal with this surrounding subject matter. Quite a nice thing, nice isn't the right word, but a curious thing is Morningstar's offices were right next to the Olympic, village in London, within like 20 meters. And they were the only people not invited to the press box of the Olympics. So I like to think of them kind of climbing to the top of the building, telescopes, and trying to write their reports. So I started imagining these situations where I give job interviews to the security guard at Boodles, for a job at Morningstar, or for Morningstar to apply to Peter Arnell, the advertising guru, for a job working with Arnell, and these kind of things. And then I thought that, again, this is not a good, it's probably not a good thing to do, but it was just for my own satisfaction. Then I started to think more about this the job interview, and how it's such a strange, bureaucratized courtship. It is to some extent this strange, it amplifies this libidinal economy and this mirroring of expectations, and so forth. So I thought, well, I'll invite, like I did with Magnetic Promenade, I'll invite artists and writers that whose work I'm very much into to write some stories for this. And so the book came back, and the book was just bound. It was just bound tight like that. And I thought about the suit that you wear. And I thought about, I thought about the ill-fitting suit And I thought about what you might do with this space here. And just as an anecdote, I recently moved to Brussels from London 2 months ago. My 2 daughters, this high, 2.5 years old, they've had a Russian nanny for the last 2 years, so they speak English with quite a particular Siberian accent. So how to stop that? We moved to Brussels. We take them to this school. They've never been to a school before. This huge school. They start at 2.5 there at the school. The school is full of kids speaking French. No English is spoken. No Siberian English is spoken. It's just French. And so my daughters, Mabel and Natalie, they say no with the accent. And I said yes, and they said no. And I said, well, life is full of disappointments. So, some are bigger than others, and this is quite a big one. And I think of this gap in the book as being where you put your disappointments, or the large suit in the shoulders. And then I made a series of airbrush paintings. So if anybody would rather see it, if anybody would rather see this painting this size rather than this size, then it looks like that. And I think of airbrush painting as being like the only time I feel like I have a real skill. And I know that when I was 16 that I was much better at it. So the challenge is to try and make the context around it, better. So the reason the context has to go up as the skill goes down. But it worked out. So there's a number of these airbrush paintings that are throughout the book. There are some fantastic short stories in here. Natasha Subramanian, an amazing writer. Jason Dodge wrote a fantastic piece for it. Heyman Chong. Angie Kiefer wrote these excerpts. We took one of those short anecdotes that she had because she was too embarrassed to actually talk about it herself, but we gave it to the writer Marina Vishmit to make it to a script. And this book is available at Books directory very soon. It just came back a couple of weeks ago with the badly fitting suit. So I'm just going to finish by reading a very short poem by the writer Matthew Dickman, which is called Dear Job Interview. After a drink of water. Dear Job Interview, you're like a father to me. What I mean is I want you to like me. I want you to look at me and think I'm doing a good job at being a person, being a son. When you haven't seen me for a long time and we walk toward each other slowly in a field of rosemary and tall trees, I keep my head bowed because I want you to think I'm lost. I want you to think I'm not worth your time and attention. I'm not fooling either of us. I walk toward you with my head bent because I don't think I'm worth anything at all. I'm not worth a wedding ring or a piece of silver with the face of a Roman emperor on it. I want you to come over and knock on my door like Tony did. He wasn't even my father. He wasn't even you, and yet he called me out to the front yard. And we stood in the cool, dark grass and threw a baseball back and forth. And afterward he hugged me and told me he was proud of me. Why would he do that? Maybe he was always looking for a father too. Maybe he felt that some way you die and that he would be thinking of you. How would he answer all your questions? I'll say something about work ethics, about how you shouldn't steal from other employees. I'll say something about the way I'm not only on time for work, but early. Really, all I'll be saying is pick me, love me, tell me I'm special. Rebecca wrote a poem about a king who tortured his only son, and how she didn't understand why he would do it. And then she ended the poem by saying you have to spend money to make money. I think you have to kill fathers to make fathers. When I think of you late at night, and the moon is filling up the bedroom, and my infant son is lit up by the moon like a blueberry bush on fire, I imagine you walking into the room in a suit that I will wear one day, or 1,000 days after you're dead. Love, Matthew. Thank you.